because the laws that were supposed to protect organizing were largely unenforced. So it's a pretty dramatic story, and it happened, much of this happened very fast. Remarkably large share both of the increase in inequality and of the decline of the labor movement in the United States took place just during the 8 years that Ronald Reagan was president. So it's a very dramatic change in America. Now, you might ask, well, where did this political change come from? Why did America become such a, if these policies that came from the 1930s, the New Deal policies, had been so popular, why did people turn their backs? Why were people willing to accept policies that benefited a relatively small number of people at the top and made it reduced wages, made people poorer further down? And the answer, now that's an interesting thing. We have a lot of discussion of this, and people talk about national security, the sense that the right was better at protecting America. We talk about social values, the religion, abortion, and those things always play a role. So as I like to say, George Bush won the election in 2004 by portraying himself as the America's defender against gay married terrorists. But if you look at the, if you look hard at the voting data, and I'm a consumer of this. We have, particularly of my Princeton colleague Larry Bartels in the politics department. One thing stands out. Actually, all of these issues about moral values, national security, they play a role in individual elections. But if you try to understand why, on a sustained basis, American political life changed so much, it actually comes down to one thing, which is race. The rise of the right, the decline of American liberalism, in other words, social democratic politics in your terminology, dates almost precisely from the civil rights movement of the 1960s. At that point, the southern part of the United States, which had been reliably democratic, even though there were some conflicts, began to move Republican. When the Voting Rights Act was passed, Lyndon Johnson told a young aide of his, who is now the famous journalist Bill Moyers, that we have just given the South to the Republicans for my lifetime and yours. And if you look at the voting patterns, outside the South, outside Southern whites, there has really been no change. But the South shifted, and surely, if we looked more closely, we would find that Northern whites as well, and everything else. Now, every law and order, crime, all of these things became, to an important extent, code words. There's a famous explanation by Lee Atwater, who was a Republican political operative in the 80s, about the use of race in politics. He gave a very candid interview in which he described, he said, you started by saying nigger, 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 and by the 80s you talked about taxes and welfare, but it was still all code for the same thing. And that was the transformation. So if you ask, why did America move to the right, that's why did America become so different from other Western democracies? It all comes back to America's original sin, which is race. One more thing, the great gaping hole. The U.S. welfare state is weak in many dimensions, but the place that's really weak is healthcare. In the advanced world, only the United States fails to guarantee healthcare to all of its citizens. How did that happen? It's a complicated story, but every time you try to understand some key development, the same thing pops up. So the nearest approach we've had until perhaps now to actually getting universal health care came in 1947, when Harry Truman, who was Roosevelt's successor, pushed for national health care. And initially, it looked like they were going to simply add health care to Social Security, to our retirement program, which is not a bad program at all. It was defeated, failed, and it failed because of a coalition between doctors, who thought it would be bad for their incomes, and Southern white politicians, who were afraid that national health care would force them to integrate their hospitals. So again and again in American life, you find the race playing a crucial thing. Okay, so I wrote this book that was published a year ago, which was actually very hopeful. That this era is coming to an end. That we were in fact getting ready for a New Deal. And why would I think that? Well, there are a number of issues politically to look at. On many, if you look at people's opinion on issues, whether it's the role of government in healthcare, the desirability of some government support, ensuring that people have decent incomes, the country has actually moved substantially to the left. It's moved in a more liberal in the U.S. Sense direction over the past 15 years. But what really changed, and what I thought would transform the political scene, was the declining significance of race in U.S. politics. This is not an original insight, but let me say this: there's a less uplifting and a more uplifting way to talk about that in America. The less uplifting is, although still valid, is the simple change in demography. The United States is becoming a more diverse country, a less white country, if you like, with growing numbers of new immigrant populations and children of new immigrants. So we're becoming a country in which the Hispanic vote is very important, in which the Asian vote is fairly important, and that means that the core constituency for whom the race issue was able to appeal is no longer a majority, and that itself makes for a change in our politics. But the uplifting thing is we really are a better country. It's astonishing to me even now to look back at public attitudes just 25 years ago, which I remember. I remember that country quite well, and to realize the amount of raw racism that still prevailed in America then, which is now gone. Not gone completely, of course, but the rawness is gone. That to take even the most, not directly a political issue, but revealing, interracial marriage. Majority of Americans disapproved, did not accept marriage between the races as recently as 1980. Now there's no, at least according to what people say in polls, there's no problem. So it's just a different country. When I wrote Conscience of a Liberal, my demonstration of the change in American politics was what I thought was the best example of what could possibly have of how much more tolerant and a better country we become, was a race for the Senate in 2006 in Virginia, traditionally a southern state, where the initially very popular incumbent senator lost the election because he was being trailed by a guy with a video camera, as all politicians are now, as all of us are now, and who was working for the other campaign and was a guy named S.J. Sidharth, an American but of South Asian ancestry, and the Senator Allen began insulting him using an obscure racial insult, which was quickly on YouTube and became known as, actually, Mr. Sidharth applied to journalism school. He was required to write an essay explaining his qualifications. And apparently his essay consisted simply of 3 words, I am macaca, which was the insult that was used against him. So I thought that was the ultimate demonstration, because the fact of the matter is that in Virginia, 20 years ago, that wouldn't have hurt a politician at all. But in 2006, it was unacceptable. So I thought that was the ultimate demonstration of how much America had changed. But of course, it's trivial compared with the fact that we just elected a president named Barack Hussein Obama, which is an awesome change. Now, by the way, in the 2008 election, did race cease to matter? The answer is no, it did not.